Welcome to On Top of the Covers, a weekly podcast by Orlove, dedicated to all of you amazing people out there that are the creative visionaries and entrepreneurs, artists, makers, disruptors of the world. You guys are constantly pushing boundaries, and that's exactly what this podcast is dedicated to. And we feature amazing inspirational stories, as previously mentioned, for people just contributing to the culture of music, how they do it creatively, artistically, personally, professionally. I'm Matt Gottesman, your host and director of the Orlove brands. You can follow along on Instagram at Matt Gottesman. Feel free to reach out, DM, text. I love replying to each and every person, and it's really just a big community here, especially also with We Are Orlove. Music, basically, as we say, it's just one of the biggest connectors in the world, right? And it's something that we heavily promote, in that it's just this common bond. And we thought, why don't we open up the conversations of art, its contributors, and their missions? And so we definitely show a lot of unconventional ways and different paths to success. And I always say success according to the individual, especially the person that we're having a conversation with. I have an amazing guest on today, Charlotte Cijffers, journalist, digital strategist, audience growth expert. We're going to be talking about the future of publishing. And for many of you that know me, this is a very, very important topic to me. In the digital world that we live in, how are we getting our media? Who's providing the media? What kind of conversations are being had? How we're using it for good, and how it's ever changing. We've been in a Web 2.0 world for quite some time. We're moving into a Web 3.0 world, and that's going to be a whole other environment, if you will, right? And so we're really going to be having a great conversation about what's been happening so far and where we're shifting to. And just a little bit of a background: Charlotte's a journalist, digital strategist, and audience growth expert, as I mentioned. Prior to 2014, she was a freelance journalist working across all facets of club culture, including DJing, promoting, and events. And then in 2014, she took on the role of digital editor at DJ Magazine's UK headquarters before expanding her role to include the magazine's seasonal Ibiza print, a publication between 2015 and 2018. And as a digital editor, she was responsible for directing content across DJ Mag's online channels year-round, totaling a reach of over 60 million users. Guys, that is not easy to do. While overseeing an extensive team of in-house and freelance staff in the US, UK, Australia, and Canada. She co-managed DJ Mag's annual Top 100 DJs poll, the world's biggest music poll, which currently tracks over 1.2 million votes per year. And in early 2019, she took on the role of head of digital and audience at Dazed Media and is currently responsible for digital strategy and audience acquisition across Dazed Digital, Dazed Beauty, Another Magazine, and Nowness. So under her tenure, Dazed Digital's audience has grown by over 120%. And while Nowness and Another Magazine's user growth grew by 80% and 35% respectively over the last 12 months. So guys, anybody listening, growth in a digital world, especially when done with just authentic community drive, is like an amazing and beautiful thing. So having Charlotte here, I'm stoked to have her here and just to talk about all these things. So Charlotte, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And so, we do something a little bit differently. There's here it's very conversational, and the only time we really do anything real questiony is when we do a rapid fire question series. There's only 4 questions, and usually you see people who do these like at the end. We thought we'd reverse that because we do nothing the same as anybody else, and we thought we'd ask them ahead of time at the very beginning. Plus, it always makes for really great content. So my question: are you ready for the rapid fire? And then we're going to go into a little bit about your background, and we're going to talk about publishing and wherever the conversation goes from there. Sound good?
Sounds good. I'm ready. Let's do it.
Amazing. Okay. So first question is, if all music is gone and completely wiped out from the face of the earth, and you only had 3 albums that you could save and listen to for the rest of your life, what would they be?
So first of all, I feel like I'm at the after party with this question. I feel like it's a question that always comes up at the after party when everyone's had a few drinks after they've been to the club. And it's actually a really great question because I feel like it's such a good way to get to know someone really fast.
Right.
Mostly because I feel like, everyone has so many identities and so many like evolutions and revolutions in their life. And, the albums that are really important to you, or those kind of legacy albums that you keep coming back to and feel so familiar, and seminal, really say something about you as a person, I think. So with that in mind, I feel like my first album has to be something dance music related, obviously. Have to tick that box. So I think in choosing this record, it makes me think back to how I first got into electronic music when I was young. And it was through my older brother then. And I was living in Australia at the time. In case you can't tell from my accent, I'm Australian. And he sent me some CDs in the post. And he sent me Underworld, 100 Days Off, Left Field, Leftism, and Sasha in Vulva. And they just changed my life, basically. And it made me, it started my love affair with dance music and with club culture. And because obviously I wasn't old enough to go clubbing at the time, I was 13 or 14. It made me connect with the music and not so much with the experiential and the hedonistic aspect of dance music, which is obviously intrinsically tied to the music itself, as we know. But I really connected with like the artistry and the emotion and the songwriting and the production and the engineering and the soundscape. And I guess out of all of those, I'd just have to pick Sasha and Vulva because it is just the most cinematic and entrancing record. And I just love it. And it just means a lot to me. So that would be my first one.
I love that you brought that up because it's true. Like, well, I mean, at least it's my truth as well. Like I shared with you is that electronic and EDM, there's definitely an art to it when you really look at the production and the sound and the additional layers that they, with the music. And when you take it from an engineering feat of just sound of like what's possible with sound and then how it actually rhythmically, like the beats per minute actually, make us feel inside and all these things versus just solely the as you said, like some of the other aspects that sometimes EDM and electronic are associated with. When you really look at the art of the production, I love it. So I definitely connected with that. So for the first one, we've got Sasha, right? That was number one.
Yes. Okay.
Number two,
I feel like I need to pick like a big pop record, like a big, gonna dance. It's gonna make me feel good. It's gonna make me want to boogie. It's gonna have some lyrics I can sing along to. And I feel like growing up in the late 80s and the early 90s, I really loved like the pop divas. So I loved my like Madonna, Whitney. I used to listen to Eurythmics a lot. Annie Lennox, obviously, in the car with my mom. My mom was a big Fleetwood Mac fan, so we listened to a lot of Stevie Nicks, obviously. But the one album that really sticks out for me that I always come back to, and it's just like the biggest bop and the biggest jam, is Janet Jackson, Control. Such an amazing album, obviously produced and engineered by Jam and Lewis. Kind of really pioneered that kind of like big slap sound of the 80s that was so iconic across loads of Madonna and Kylie Minogue and lots of other kind of big mainstream pop artists at the time. But I think the other thing that makes me really love that album is just that it was like an emancipation album for her from her quite controlling dad. Obviously, we know the history of the Jacksons and how that kind of turned out for various other family members. But for her, there's such strength and such power and in that album and in the lyrics and also beyond that, like it's just amazingly produced and it's just a bop. So I feel like I need to take Janet Jackson, Control with me.
I love it. And I'm there with you. This is actually on my Apple iPhone. It's like I have Rhythm Nation on here. I had her number ones in 97 that was released. Janet in 93. But Rhythm Nation 1814 and 89 was phenomenal as well. Like just I have her like I have pretty much every album on my Apple iPhone and I still revisit her like often. So I definitely amazing. Okay, so that's number 2, Janet. And who does the coveted number 3 go to?
And number 3 finally goes to I think an album that really spoke to me as a young girl and I think really encapsulated and still encapsulates like a lot of what it means to, or articulates, I would say, what it means to be young and to kind of fall in love for the first time and to kind of experiences all these kind of like challenges as a young person of, I don't know, maybe like figuring out your own identity or having your heart broken or, maybe growing apart from certain relationships. And also the songwriting is just impeccable. And that album is Lauryn Hill, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. yeah, I would argue kind of one of the most iconic hip hop and R&B albums ever made. And I've also seen her live twice, and she vocally, you know, lives up to her reputation as one of the most kind of dynamic and stunning vocalists I've ever heard live. And I just, yeah, maximum respect for Lauren. Oof. So that's the third one.
You know, this question never ceases to amaze me, what each of you choose and why, and how we connect nostalgically to something for multiple reasons and very life related. Incredible though. Lauryn Hill, Janet Jackson, Sasha are those are three incredible albums. So, and artists. Lauryn Hill, I mean, I know everybody wanted her to come back with more music, and we thought she was. But that was an incredible Miseducation of Lauryn Hill was an amazing album. Okay, so question number 2. Name an influential person that if you could sit down with for a night, they could be living, non-living, historical. You can go Leonardo da Vinci. I mean, whoever. It could be somebody present. If you could sit with any one person, living or non-living, for one night and just have a full-on conversation, who would it be?
It would be my number one favorite, most loved musical artist of all time, the King. Who else could you pick? It's Prince.
Oof. Think about that conversation. I'm sure you have. I feel like that man wasn't even on this planet. Seriously.
He's an alien. He's gone to the spaceship with Bowie and Elvis.
Yeah, and I feel like he was just occupying time here as like, I'm just delivering messages to you. So hopefully you guys get them before I'm out.
I mean, in terms of sheer talent, I just don't know if there's been anybody really like Prince. I mean, wrote all his own records, played every instrument, produced every record, engineered it, was, you know, so unique in the sense that when he did finally separate from his label and, you know, did the iconic performance with the slave written on his cheek, really owned the process from end to end. And that was so revolutionary at the time when he did emancipate himself from his label, because artists, there was unheard of artists just didn't do that, beyond the fact that he was genuinely one of the most talented humans that ever lived. I think that really drew a line in the sand and was like the true kind of start of big mainstream artists being able to believe that they could be truly independent. And I think for that, as well as the amazing talent and the amazing music and the amazing songwriting, I really respect him, and I'd love to chat to him about that. So
agreed. I would love to know what was going on behind the scenes that he really wanted to bring justice for. I came from a very entrepreneurial family, so independence is all we've known. And I've never been the corporate route. And I remember even just watching artists from very early on, very talented people kind of have that, you know, have to go through a lot of that where they're the talent, but they're not necessarily reaping all the rewards from that. And I thought it was very, very bold of him to be like, hey, here's what's really going on. And, you know, and we need to own our work, and we need to have more creative control, and we need to rethink how the system is created and not necessarily, you know, working for us. So I really, really admired. And then, you know, he was very vocal about it even when he was winning awards and he was sharing like what was going on. And then literally to change your name to a symbol and the genius behind it, just to take a stand and on principles. And to your point, you're the talent plus a critical thinking mindset that can revolutionize the approach to how artists take back their ownership. I mean, it's amazing. So that's got to easily be a top 5 for me for spending a musical person to spend a night a night just talking to. Amazing. Okay, so next question. In your opinion, what is the best music-focused film of all time for you? Now, this could be a documentary. It can be a fiction film just for fun. It could be a series. It can be anything, but just music is somewhere, you know, involved in the storyline, if you will. Okay.
So I have one fictional story-based one, and then I have a documentary because I couldn't pick, so I just did both. So for the documentary, there's a famous music documentary series called Dancing in the Street, and it was made by the BBC, and it was a 7-part series. And it started, back in kind of the 1950s and went all the way through until I think the early 90s. It's still available. You can watch it on YouTube. But the reason that it was special to me was because it really gave me that first kind of like window into the world of the breadth of all the music that was out there, you know, from Sun Records to Stax to Motown to Sound of Philadelphia, through to the 80s with what happened with Janet, through to disco, through to boogie funk, through to 90s pop, through to Max Martin, through the Swedish pop machine, all of this stuff. Like, you know, I didn't know anything about music except what I heard on the radio. And so that documentary series really opened my eyes to, I guess, not only what was out there, but also why things felt so familiar when I listened to music at that time, you know, like the influences and the melodic structures and the architecture and the music, modern music machine, I guess. It was just mind blowing to me. So that documentary for sure, look it up on YouTube if you can. It's amazing. And then the second one is Almost Famous, because I just love that movie.
Good choices. I'm gonna check out Dancing in the Street. I was not aware of that one, so I'm gonna be on it. I'll have to look it up online. We won't promote those. Where? Yeah, should I just Google it? Where can we find it?
It's on YouTube.
It's on YouTube. Perfect. Yeah. Incredible. Okay, and final question: what's an important book, podcast, Audible, platform, anything in general that's really helps you navigate your creativity and passion?
So if I had to pick one book, it would be this book. I have it here, actually. For everyone listening at home, it's called Energy Flash, A Journey Through Rave, Music and Dance Culture. And it's by a very famous music historian and biographer called Simon Reynolds. And this book, I mean, look at it. You can see how big it is, right? It is literally your one-stop shop navigation to electronic music. And anybody that even has like a casual interest in electronic music or dance music or clubbing or rave culture needs to read this book. Like, it is so truly comprehensive, like from everything from, you know, ecstasy and rave culture, Detroit techno, acid house and UK rave culture, trip hop, underground resistance, the sound of Detroit, Chicago, jungle, sampling and soundscapes, like EDM and big room in the US. I mean, like, this book literally has it all. And it's delivered in such a kind of objective and academic way as well. Not in a way that it's written so it's like a thesis, like it's not impenetrable, it's still an enjoyable read. But I think his approach to it is so considered and so systematic and so objective and also so reverent of the artistry around dance music, which we mentioned before. Yeah, it's a compendium of everything that you need to know about dance music. So if you love dance music, you need to read this, basically.
It's a massive book. It's massive.
It's huge.
But I love the fact that it's not like you said, it's not like from a thesis, you know, theorizing kind of standpoint, but more from like a documenting of cultures, you know, and the transitioning of all of these layers to, you know, electronics. So amazing. Okay. I know we're going to talk about the future of publishing, and you've got this incredible background, and I know we can go on a tear, and we usually do, and we can go in any direction that we want. But I would love for the audience to get this background of yours because, first of all, besides the fact that you are highly knowledgeable on music and music culture, just for context of like, how did we get here? You know, what was the journey like? You know, and you can go as far back as you'd like. Of course, you can go prior to 2014, you can start at 2004, wherever you want. But how did we get here? Because you're doing all these amazing things and you're continuing to push boundaries. And there's going to be a lot of changes coming up over the next so many years. So I would love for the audience to get to know you more. So you can start as far back as you'd like to go. Some start at the Big Bang Theory. It's really up to you. But I would love for you to give a little bit more, you know, the background and how we got here.
Sure. So I grew up in Australia, which I mentioned before. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life for a really, really, really long time. And I think it's really important to flag that because I think that whatever success looks like to someone, you know, maybe people would look at me and perceive that what I've done is, you know, what they think is successful or what success in some small way might look like in a professional spectrum. I think it's really important to be transparent about the fact that like I really, really, really did not get my shit together until I was like 27. So, you know, I think a lot of young people feel very like crippled by the fact that they should absolutely know exactly what they want to do with their lives by the time they graduate high school, or by the time they're picking a university course, or by the time they finish university, or by the time they hit a certain age or whatever. And I myself was crippled with that same feeling of like, I don't know what to do. I have passions about all these things. Like I love music and I know lots about music and I love reading about music and I love writing and I love media, but I'm also really passionate about history and I love traveling, and how does that all fit together in this like my mad spider web of me landing in some kind of like, you know, moderately engaging and rewarding career. So yeah, when I finished university, I moved straight to London. Both of my parents were really, really avid travelers, and kind of traveled the world and had these like amazing, dynamic, incredible lives. And when I moved over to London, I spent basically the first 5 years or so just working in clubs so I could be able to afford to travel at any second that I could. And I know it sounds so cheesy. Like people are always like, oh, you know, traveling is better than a job. It gives you so much life experience. You know, it helps you grow. It helps you mature. It gives you a sense, it fosters a sense of independence and autonomy. And I'm here to tell you that it really does. It's not cheesy at all.
So
I mean, it is cheesy, but it was true for me that those kind of first early years of my 20s where I was just traveling and honestly just working a job to earn money to be able to do that and facilitate that was so important and really shaped me into the person that I am now. And then when I finally decided that I needed to like get a job and have a career, I realized that I loved music and I loved writing and I wanted to become a music journalist, which is probably one of the most difficult careers to pursue in terms of steady income and job opportunities. So I started a blog, which is called Chase the Compass. And we did an event series with it as well. We used to run club events around London and internationally. And I basically just started using that as a shop front for my writing because I was an unknown writer and couldn't get anyone to publish my work. And I certainly couldn't get anyone to, you know, I didn't have a profile. I couldn't get anyone to pay me for it. I didn't know anyone at music magazines. You know, it was seemed totally impenetrable to me. So I just started this blog and I started writing about it, and I started about music, and I started doing artist interviews and EP reviews and taking pictures at our parties and building a real community around that blog and the media and content that we created, which, as we'll probably talk about later in this conversation, you know, it's all about community in media. And eventually I ended up getting a internship at DJ Mag, which I did for about 10 days. And then the boss of DJ Mag asked me if I wanted to have a full-time job as a staff writer. I think I was just so obsessively keen that he just like, he couldn't say no. I think I walked through the doors and they just knew immediately they weren't going to get rid of me.
Perfect.
And then I started working at DJ Mag and I was there for 5 years. Mm-hmm. Started as a staff writer, eventually became digital editor, then took on the Ibiza print mag as well, which I did for 2 seasons. Then also briefly ran the US print publication as well. And then after 5 years there, got an amazing offer from Days Media, which is where I am now, working across their portfolio of 2 print magazines and 5 websites. And yeah, that's where I've been for the last 2 years.
That's amazing. I was jotting down some notes because there's some really key points in there that I love that you said. The first part about you didn't really know what you wanted to do. Thank you for sharing that, because I think a lot of people feel like they have to have that figured out, and you really don't. You have to be willing to discover yourself, and you did that. And I like the fact that you were saying, well, you know, I love music and I love writing and I like media and I like history and I like all of these different things. And we're living in a very unique time where there's a lot of new roles, new responsibilities, new jobs, new everything, because the information era has really created new roles and allowed us to merge so many different things faster than ever before. And like roles that exist today didn't exist like even last week. You know, it's like, hey, now you have people who are like, I like manage Clubhouse for this and this. And you're like, what? You know, community forum, community, right? And the other thing that I like that you were also saying about the travel, I agree. as well. I did a lot of traveling early on. I remember having a conversation with somebody who reminded me, and he did as well. And I said, did we do it backwards? Because we were talking about older people once they hit like 50, 55, 60, and they're like, oh, I'm going to start doing some more traveling now. But they had kind of, quote unquote, had their shit together earlier on, quote unquote. And I said, I was like, do you think we did it backwards? And he's like, yeah, and you should be proud of that. And my friend said, I was like, yeah, I agree, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts. He said, well, we didn't wait until later on. We used early on to teach us things culturally and understand the world at large, which then led into how we manage our businesses now and how we manage people across all cultures. And because, we've got a different kind of, it's just a different path. And so I agree with you about how the travel, really can transcend your experiences into things that you're going to do much later on and in business, and how it probably helps you connect globally with everybody. You're like, yeah, I get you. I totally connect with you. I love also that this was huge. When you started the blog, Chase the Compass, I thought that's a really big point to make, because you don't need any permission to start anything anymore. And sometimes, because industry makes it difficult to break in, well, who says we have to wait? And I really related to that, because I too started writing. I knew I was a writer. I knew I loved writing, but I didn't have a traditional writing. You go to school and that's what, then you use that as your resume. I went for school for international business. They're gonna be like, what do you think you're a writer? So I was like, I think I'll just blog and interview people and we'll talk and we'll write. And then I realized, oh, wow, it has nothing to do with industry and everything to do with community. And when you have the audience, I think that pretty much sums it up. And so you brought up community and audience. We'll get into that. So I loved all of those points and then some. So I would love for you to touch on that a little bit more. Like, what's happening? What do you think is happening currently? Like, how has community really played a role into media and new media? And, and we'll just start kind of talking about, independent publishing as a whole. You clearly started off as an independent publisher. You ended up in digital publishing, even in bigger roles. And, where do you see it going from here?
I mean, big question.
Right.
I guess the first thing is going back to the kind of point about community and also kind of everyone being able to be a blogger or to be a content creator. Like, UGC, that's a terrible industry acronym, user-generated content, it is the future. And what I would say is one of the biggest challenges for publishers, or one of the things that's really coming next for publishers, is how do publishers navigate the fact that social is the new publisher. Social is a magazine in itself, and everyone can run their own magazine, and everyone can be their own photographer, and everyone can be their own reporter, and everyone can be their own promotions manager and their own PR and their own ad agent, or whatever, whatever they're, calling, whatever they need at that time. And I think that the rise of outsider social, or, the kind of social media platforms outside the mainstream. So I think, when a lot of people think about social, they think about Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. But I think where the really, really exciting stuff and kind of quite disruptive stuff, and the stuff that's really challenging publishers on a kind of community growth and kind of engagement level is, stuff like Discord, yes, even stuff like Pinterest, even stuff like YouTube. Essentially we think about YouTube as a video platform, but YouTube is a social platform. And we know that YouTube is really, truly, aside from TikTok, the heartland of Generation Z. So for publishers, I think, how do we get, especially young people, off these walled gardens, off these, platform-centric places where they live and consume content constantly, and actually get them onto our website, get them interacting with the traditional publishing model, get them, getting an ad impression on a unit on a page, or reading some co-branded content. I think that honestly is probably the biggest challenge for digital publishers. One, the fact that everybody is a publisher, and two, that social media is a complete walled garden, and it's been designed in a way that, social platforms spend hundreds of millions of dollars using scientists to make sure that you never leave that platform and you keep scrolling, right? So I think that's a challenge for publishers, but I also think that it's very exciting because what's coming next for publishers is how to work with these independent creators, how to amplify independent creators' voices, how to amplify and extend their fan bases, and also how to leverage their sphere of influence to make it work both for the publisher and both for the independent curator or the independent creator, I should say. That's the first big thing, I think, when it comes to the future of publishing, or kind of like, I guess, the landscape right now. And I just want to flag on the kind of community side of thing as well. I was kind of thinking about really good examples of that. And I just want to flag Richie Horton has a really amazing Discord channel. And, you know, if we're thinking about community and we're thinking about a community that's based around like certain values, for example, everybody that's in this Discord community of Richie's is so aligned, not like only on audience interest profile, but also potentially like on values as well, like people that are into techno, people that enjoy being part of a community, that enjoy listening to dance music, that are really interested in, future technologies, that are interested in, all of this stuff that like Richie's brand really encompasses. And I think that that's such an interesting way to leverage your brand and identity as an artist and as a creator to create a network of people all over the world that can come together and can be connected through you. I just think that's so exciting.
I love all of this. I was just thinking, as you were saying, between Discord and Telegram, and watching my friends who we've all kind of come up as content creators. And so watching them, whether it's related to biohacking, crypto, to content creation, publishing, all these different things. It's really, really interesting to see how you can have just full-on community engagement inside of these platforms, right? And it's exciting because that's where, to your point, where that's going to be a challenge for, some of the brands or from some of the publishers, understanding that, like, as you mentioned, how to leverage their sphere of influence. And these people, all of us, have a responsibility to our audience, right? To really do the right thing, whatever our value system is. And hopefully it comes from it comes from your heart, but it's a good value system. And because the bottom line is, especially as I engage in these Telegram rooms and in these Discord rooms, it's very communal. And it's very like, hey, what do you recommend? What do you this? So we'd like to share that. And in fact, even it's very values driven. If somebody is kind of spamming it, you gotta go. If somebody, one gentleman who's been on the podcast several times, and I really appreciate him. He's very influential in the biohacking world. He literally gets people out of the Telegram room if they, are are not adding to the collective. If they're spamming and they're being a little disruptive, and because it's about really honoring everybody that's in there and stuff like that. Well, when you've got 3,000 people in there that are very engaged, consistently, that's influence. And I think sometimes people look so heavily at these high numbers, like, oh, I've got 1 million followers or 2 million followers. I'm like, no. You want the person that there's 3,000 conversationalists happening at that moment. That is very different than I'll put up a post to 1 million people and, I get a like or a follow or a like, or, maybe a thumbs up or whatever as a comment. It's much different when there's conversations happening. So I love that you bring that up. I also think that, please.
I was just going to say, I think that's really interesting. I think a lot of the focus in digital publishing over the last kind of 10 years or so has also been very scale focused. So who has the biggest reach, who has the biggest vanity number on social, who has the most unique users to their website every month. And actually what's happening with, kind of the drive for anonymity and for privacy and concerns around first-party data, and also, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, but this kind of movement into Web 3.0 and this idea of kind of hyper-personalized experiences on the internet and hyper-personalized content and ecosystems. it's all about highly engaged, small communities of people that have extreme value to your brand. So, I mean, it's wonderful if I can create an article that 200,000 people look at. But at the end of the day, from a brand perspective and from an advertiser perspective, I'm more interested in 10,000 people who are going to read 4 to 5 pages in a session, are going to have a 50% conversion rate on all the advertising I show them, because it's going to be super targeted and something that feels genuine and authentic to them, and then spammed by a programmatic ad about a toilet seat. That is much, much more valuable to the entire ecosystem, to the user who gets a better user experience, to the advertiser who wants to make money, wants to make money from conversion because someone buys a product, or they want to increase brand equity and visibility, whatever they want. And for the publisher itself, because it builds loyalty and engagement with that user. So I think that it's a really exciting time literally right now. And I think what spurred this on is very much, as I've said, the idea of this push for privacy and anonymity on the internet, and also the decision by big tech to get rid of the third-party cookie, which is a super boring ad tech conversation that we don't need to have. But the end result is that we will end up with, hopefully, publishers that are much more tailored at individualized, high-quality user experience, rather than just lots and lots and lots of scale and lots of ads that speak to no one.
And as a digital strategist, how long, I mean, I can speak for me, but I would love to, how long have we been saying the importance of engagement and community and people, and I would watch industry push numbers. And I'm like, you don't get it. I was like, numbers are no good without the quality, without the community. And so it's just interesting and fascinating to watch play out. Now people are like, I think we have to really focus on quality now. We have to focus on these micro communities, and why are micro influencers doing better than macro influencers? And why is my conversion rates higher and my return rates higher? And I'm like, yeah, why is that? So I mean, I can only imagine how long you probably, because you were community from the start. You were community from the start when you were doing Chase the Compass. That was like, you already kind of had that, I think, built in to your digital DNA, if you will. And now, isn't it kind of a fun renaissance period? I feel like we're about to kind of a full circle and a renaissance at the same time because of what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for bigger publishers, it's a bit of a scary time, because I think that there's all the technological questions about how like universal user ID will work in terms of personalized content and ad targeting. I don't know if that's been fully realized. I mean, maybe we won't realize until we're in it. And obviously there's a lot of stuff around privacy, and with Google Sandbox and all of these new tools that are coming out, and obviously GDPR constraints and privacy laws in the US, and all of this stuff around data. And I guess, everything that we're going to talk about later on in terms of moving to this new Web 3.0 world, universe, ecosystem. But yeah, it is an exciting time. And I think for me as well, as you said, because I came from something truly independent and community driven, and I always had such a close and direct dialogue with my audience. I would be writing on the blog, and then I would see someone the next night at a party, and we would chat about that post. We had that real IRL connection with one another. I think that has probably innately steered me towards jobs with publishers who are independent and also really stand for something. I think that there's a lot of talk around like the downfall of the print mag, of print publishing, in lieu of like, full digital 360 experiences. Both the publishers that I've ever worked for have been independent. DJ Mag's independent, and so has Staged Media as well. And I think that both of them have really, really strong, exciting, beautifully curated print products. And I think that's one of the things that's made me excited about working for those publications. But also, it's really exciting to have a tangible product that you can like hold in your hot little hand, and you can have a bit of a romance with, and you can sit down and have that kind of slow journalism experience with. And I think the reason I bring up those print products is that I think having that as a facet to that brand, and having those publishers as something truly independent, has probably, innately drawn me to them, and just makes them feel a little bit more special than just living completely in the online world.
I agree. I don't know if it's just because of my background in all this and loving both, I believe for me in the merging of the physical and the digital. And there's so much fun to be playing in both. You mentioned it was, for maybe some of these bigger brands, a scary time. And I was thinking, but massive opportunity to really rethink how they innovate and pivot, right? And I get it from the advertising standpoint and data standpoint, but to look into it as just a massive opportunity, which is, it's scary sometimes for bigger brands. So I totally get that. And I love what you said about print, because that tangible component, whether it was Serial Mag or High Snobiety or Trouvé Mag, where it's like maybe quarterly and it comes out 4 times a year, or some were coming out monthly, but it's got that like coffee table style feel and higher price points. And, and there was a surge with print in some cases, even amongst the millennial generation, of having that tangible asset. And so I would love to kind of explore what tangible and digital look like in this next Web3, because you're starting to see this. And, I know NFTs are a very hot topic. I started looking into them last year. I've loved crypto for like 5 or 6 years, but looking at NFTs, and you're seeing this kind of merging of digital and physical, where sometimes artists are creating a physical product that you can get the certificate of authenticity and authentication online, and a token that comes with it. But hey, here's also a physical product. So now there's like this really full 360 experience between a virtual digital world and your physical world. And so I would love, we can go on a tear, I'm sure, and we will. So wherever direction you want to go, and I would love, because I'm sure you're immersed in all of this, and there's a lot, happening in these virtual worlds, right? And I wanted to talk about virtual worlds and mixed reality and VR, everything, and what your thoughts are on it, what that maybe means for music, and then what that just means for content creators in general.
Yeah, I think going back to the print thing, I think that, what's happened in the last year or so has obviously been very, very challenging for print product, and particularly, transparently for music print magazines. We don't need to name them, but there are a few that have gone out of print, very sadly. And last year's situation was obviously really hard on print product.
Right.
And I think one of the reasons why it was so difficult as well is that, buying print product and buying these beautiful magazines that we're speaking about, buying a copy of DJ Mag or Mix Mag or even Rolling Stone, it's a crime of opportunity. So, subscribe, but we have less financial and less attention bandwidth now than we ever did. And obviously there we also have something that we call subscriber fatigue, which is, a lot of people will maybe subscribe to one culture publication, maybe they'll subscribe to one hard news source, maybe they'll pay for an Audible platform, maybe they'll pay for Spotify, but there's only so much kind of financial and mental bandwidth which people have to be, entering and subscribing to these walled gardens. So a lot of print product is actually just purchased out of opportunity. You might see an ad for it on the street, or you see it on newsstand, or you're at the airport and you want to buy a beautiful magazine to read on your flight. So I think the situation of last year has hit print product hard because that opportunity has been removed, right? So I think that's interesting. But I also think that maybe in a way that kind of that challenge with print product has, as you say, had kind of expedited publishers thinking around what they should be doing around working in a more digital way, presenting content in a more exciting way, being able to kind of think about, as we mentioned before, how publishers can work with social to amplify creative voices or get their content onto social platforms in a more dynamic way. Obviously moving into how we think about how publishers and content creators can work with NFTs, which is such a hot topic at the moment. I can't tell you how many times I have said the word NFTs in the last 2 years. It's wild. But on the NFT thing specifically, and I'm kind of aware that I'm jumping around, but there's a lot of themes here.
Yeah.
On the NFT thing, I think that we're hearing a lot of chat from brands about minting NFTs and whether, fashion brands should be working with NFTs or, whether there's kind of a gold rush to be had or some money to be made around this kind of influx of information and hysteria around NFTs. And I actually think that the publishing element or the kind of media coverage of these big auctions around NFTs, Grimes selling NFTs for millions or whoever selling whatever for crazy money, is actually distracted from the really exciting core element of what NFTs do. And what NFTs do is give full financial and creative autonomy back to the artists. Being able to have creators completely in control of the financial parameters and payment around their art, and having that minted to the blockchain, and also the opportunity around smart contracts and the automation of royalties or contractual things being broken, or making sure that they're adhered to in an automated real-time fashion, is so, so, so exciting, and really democratizes the artistic process, which for artists, whether that be, fashion designers, photographers, musicians, that's, really been missing and really been dominated either by platforms or by middlemen or by labels, by agents. And this kind of NFT new reality is so exciting for creators.
I am going to put that on repeat to so many people, because that's the main point. What you're saying with, democratizes the artist, full financial and creative autonomy. I felt like, and I still feel like, the media does what it does best. Like, here's an end success. So-and-so sells, 3 million in 4 minutes. You should get on this too. And everybody wants to do it. And I like some of the communities that I'm a part of that say, listen, we really have to nurture this thing. 5 to 10 years, the next 5 to 10 years are going to be amazing. And you can't go into with these expectations of this is what's going to happen, and then I'm going to make my millions. Because first of all, the crypto, the Web 3.0 community in general it's at a totally different mindset. It's an abundance mindset that is about like how to take back creative control and democratizing the constraints that have held back the artists and the creatives, which really just want to own, create, grow financially. And a lot of times they're just like, oh yeah, I'll leave a lot of it on the blockchain, and some of it I'll pay the bills with, and I'll just keep building. Like, at least I'm in my control of what I'm doing now. And then you're right. So there's this like kind of influx, as you said, of information, or like the hysteria. It kind of almost takes away from the massive, amazing opportunity that is happening. And it's very early on. And I think it's just great to nurture getting into the understanding of it, the minting and the writing the smart contracts and just how to do the things. So people ask me, they're like, what do you recommend? I'm like, I say recommend just experimenting with it for you and your community, and understanding its value propositions and the technology in doing it, which, I get it maybe is not as organized, and luckily we have a background to understand it easier. But I think it's an amazing time. I think it's absolutely incredible once you remove kind of the distractions of like, you should get in and make your millions. It's like, well, hold up a second. let's just like cool it a little bit. So I love that you bring that up,
Yeah, I mean, the thing is as well that I think a lot of the buzz that I've been hearing around NFTs, and I guess from brands and from advertisers and from other publishers, is really exciting, because I think it kind of brings this whole world of crypto assets and cryptocurrency, into the spotlight again, beyond just the crazy headlines in the mass media of, Bitcoin's up by 400% year on year. And, as a casual retail investor, if you invest now, you'll make millions. And I think it's interesting that, NFTs have been able to break through and actually get that mainstream media coverage that, previously was reserved for clickbait headlines about Bitcoin.
Right. Yeah. Well, the discussion of it is that a lot of these coins, I always tell people, like, well, if stocks are backing businesses, and they're like, yeah, I'm like, okay, well, think of the same thing as coins are backing, software or use cases on the blockchain. Well, we're now finally seeing use cases being initiated, and for what they're doing in the vertical integration of, from the nodes in the network all the way down through to getting to the consumer, and how they protect at all the different layers and how it actually works. We're now actually getting to see its fruition of, what the coins were backing, and there's a use case, and it's not just, hey, invest in these coins and make all this money. And to your point about the clickbait. So, I mean, where do you see innovation in the publishing space? Where do you foresee? I'm not sure if you're familiar. I'm just now getting familiar with mirror.xyz. Theirs is the $right, and so they actually have a whole thing on for the writer side, for the writers, that it's not just for the graphic designers and the artists now. It's also like, hey, for all the writers out there, for all the authors, for all the publishers. It's new. I'm still learning about that, but and whether you're familiar with it or not, I'd be curious just to get your take on writing and publishing in this new space and in Web3, and what do you think is currently being untapped, and any other ideas of where you think it might be heading as well?
So I think to like step back a bit from Web 3.0, I mean, in the short term for kind of publishing, I feel like, as I said before, the kind of main innovations obviously going to come from death of third-party cookie, the kind of rise in individual user IDs, and kind of increased privacy and data protection on the internet, and therefore a better user experience. But I also think that there's a big conversation going on right now about actual like framework as well. I mean, the future in terms of actually like publishing digital frameworks online is AMP. Obviously, we know, which is like for people that don't know, it's like a quick load page that's specifically coded for mobile. And I think that although that sounds terribly boring, I actually think that it's quite a big problem for publishers, because if you think about 17 years of legacy, rich text, images, and content on a website, that's quite difficult to serve at speed. And we understand that, users on the internet now, they demand expediency, right? I mean, if you have more than a 2-second load time on a page, people will bounce. And I think that that's a big consideration for publishers as well. So actual like framework and technology around how we host content is a really big thing. In the short term, I'm talking in the next 2 to 5 years from an innovation perspective on the technology end, that's a really big thing for us.
That's a good point.
And then also, I guess the other thing is, speaking about where publishing is going to go from a content perspective, I kind of feel like it's interesting that a lot of social platforms are actually taking a lot of their new features straight from publishers. So, for example, Facebook now wants to be Substack. So they're setting up an ability for, journalists and writers to be able to start their own direct marketing and newsletter products through Facebook. Or, for example, Clubhouse, which was an amazing new social platform that started recently. Instagram has now introduced Rooms, which basically duplicates that same function where you can now have like, I don't know how many people, but up to 10 people on a live or something like that. So I think that having these kind of like classic publishing tools. Oh, actually, and another thing that Instagram's done, which is really interesting as well, is that they've launched a thing called Instagram Guides, which essentially replicates the good old listicle format, top 10 things to know about blah, which we would traditionally do on a publishing website. But now we see that inside the Instagram platform called Instagram Guides. So I think, as I said before, it's going to be interesting what's coming next on the innovation side of publishing, how publishers deal with the fact that social is replicating what we do inside their platforms, but also the fact that, platforms like Substack or Patreon, or even something like OnlyFans, for example, allows you to have full autonomy and control over your content. So where does that leave publishers? I don't have the answer to it right now, but I would flag that's going to be the space in which, true innovation will thrive. And these are the questions that we need to answer, and this is where we need to innovate. And also beyond that, I also just think more on the technology side as well, I think that the relationship between publishers and gaming. Mm-hmm. So we know that people spend a lot of time, or a lot of their kind of time, real estate inside gaming worlds, and this will only continue to increase with virtual worlds or AR or mixed reality. Also how publishers work within that space, how people consume content within those spaces over the next 5 to 10 years, particularly within the kind of mixed reality environments that we predict are going to come in, particularly with kind of wearables that are coming in with Google Glasses, or potentially with contacts in the short to near to long-term future, depending on how fast technology gets there. Again, this is kind of the space where publishers need to eke out exactly how and where they fit into that new reality, and how people will be kind of consuming articles and video and opinion conversation.
Fire. I love Substack. I absolutely love Substack. It's so clean and it's so easy and so putting the control back into the publisher and the autonomy and the ease. And it's like this, I thought they did such an incredible job. But maybe just I'm being biased because I love it so much and getting ready to launch something new with Substack just because I love it. But it's interesting what you bring up about Facebook and Instagram. Well, really Facebook, let's just call it, this is all the same company, but usually using like, hey, you guys are doing some autonomous things over there. I think we'll bring those things in house. And this made me think of this question, which is because of the privacy issue and because of the concept of autonomy becoming more to the forefront. I know it's a tricky question, but can social platforms almost kind of implode from doing just too much? Because it's like, look, I like you for these things, but I need my space. Like if you think about like a personal, like, I mean, in general, in life, in the individual as a whole, we all need our autonomy while also being partnered or being, using things that like growth, right? But I mean, we still like, the part of our individual growth is that autonomy and that accountability and responsibility. I know I'm kind of taking it a little bit more spiritual, but can social implode in a way, social media platforms, or almost kind of like do too much, I should say, not maybe implode, but just do too much, because there has to be this balance for the fact that the market is saying that they want more autonomy. What are your thoughts about that?
I mean, I think that this is such a good point because it takes this conversation full circle back to the beginning, which is the question of, can magazines or publishers, and especially independent ones, survive? And I think the key to these publications surviving is one thing, and that is people miss curation. So we live in a always on 24/7 digital first society where we are hammered with content night and day across thousands of social platforms. They're now serving display advertising on TV when you pause your TV. Like it's absolutely everywhere, let alone what we were talking about before about, the future when we're going to be living in mixed reality, when we're getting AR ads and IRL ads across our devices. And I think that this is the place where magazines can and publishers can continue to thrive, is that, yes, we want to live in a world which is highly curated. And I think as time goes on and we get into Web 3.0, we will continue to see a hyper-personalized, hyper-curated experience for us in the digital landscape. We're only ever going to see content provided to us by third parties that they know we're going to like, because that keeps us in the platform, that keeps us scrolling, that keeps us looking at more ads, that keeps us engaging, that keeps us clicking, that keeps us converting, that keeps us spending money. But I think that the thing that's missing in that is the expert, is the human element, is the editor, is the curator, the Anna Wintour, or the fashion expert, or the David Attenborough, or the whoever. I mean, those are pretty macro examples there, but even down to like just your favorite politics editor from The Guardian that you follow on Substack. I think that this is where publishers will thrive, having the ability to create a website where a real human has curated the best bits of the internet for you, or a real human has put together a beautifully laid out tangible print product that shows you the things that they love and that they're interested in and that they've curated for you. And I think in a world of constant content 24 hours a day and so much useless content that ends up in what we call the content graveyard, right, which just goes somewhere we never know where it is, I think that's the real power of magazines and publishers, standing for something and beautiful curation and expertise.
And it brings it right back to community. So your full circle brings it right back to the full circle of community, of having that, a subject matter expert constantly engaging with the audience and saying, hey, look what's been put together. What are your thoughts? Let's talk. Oh, now I'm getting your feedback. This will now go into maybe how I'm curating the next piece of information. And I don't know. I think it's a very exciting time. Where do you see this? And we'll be wrapping here soon, but I love this conversation. Like, we could go in a million different directions, but I would love to get, what do you think about it for music right now, as a whole, where in this kind of virtual world that we're building, and whether it's events or ticketing, I know we were going to maybe talk a little bit about that, or just music as a whole. what's happening in a Web 2.0 world and a Web 3.0 world, because I feel like they're kind of coexisting and we're seeing a little bit of it, or just any other thoughts about that, of what maybe excites you about it?
I think what's happened in the last year has obviously had terrible ramifications for the music industry, particularly for dance music, where so much of artists' revenue was made from gigs and from touring rather than, potentially selling records. And that's obviously been very, very difficult for a lot of artists. But one thing that I think is a positive around that is that bigger music labels and brands and events have really thought about how they can exist in this Web 3.0 world or convergent 2.0, 3.0 world. And I think that there's been so many really exciting, dynamic, interesting examples of artists and music brands doing really interesting things. I mean, the thing that springs to mind to me that most people will have probably seen would have been the virtual festival built on Unreal Engine from Tomorrowland. Mm-hmm. Incredible. They took their whole festival and made it into a virtual world with full, all the stages curated, like amazing avatars and responsive stuff and the whole shebang. Obviously, that's quite an extreme example because they've got a lot of monetary backing behind them to be able to do a project like that. But I think it's a good line in the sand as to what, virtual events and experiences and music experiences could look like in the future. And that wouldn't have happened, or the pressure to create something like that wouldn't have happened without the challenges of the last year. Mm-hmm. And then I also want to flag that something really interesting just went up yesterday that I'd encourage everyone to look at, and that is a new collaboration between Dixon and Transmoda and Den and DJ, I believe. And they've actually done a kind of live show from Dixon where they have done a virtual render of his favorite art gallery in Belgium, and he's playing as an avatar within that world. Mm-hmm. Again, potentially Incredible. Not something that would have been an option or would have even been thought of as a priority, let's say, before what happened last year. But out of the ashes, we find innovation, we find gold. So I think There's amazing stuff happening in music that has been pushed forward by the situation from last year. Such great examples. And we always find innovation out of historically crisis matters or times of despair. Some of the most innovation has been founded in throughout all of history during those times. So, and I love that. It's such a good example with Tomorrowland. And I almost feel like Tomorrowland had to. That's like their whole, the basis of the brand name. Sort of like, hey, we'll show you how we'll constantly innovate something new. So I feel like they were built to do this, in a virtual world. And it's also incredible to see like what's happening in places like Decentraland and other places where, digital real estate is being curated, and then museums and art galleries are being put up to like feature whole communities coming together to see the artwork or listen to the music. And you're just like, all right, well, there's a whole other reality that we have to really embrace and get to know. So I love that you're bringing up all these great examples, Speaking of digital real estate, I'm not going to explain what this is, but I would encourage everyone to look it up. And it's a new-ish platform, I think founded last year, called Superworld. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but I would encourage everyone to check it out if we're thinking about ownership of what exists in the physical but in the digital space, and how we can personalize our experiences through Maps APIs and how that looks in terms of looking at AR and how that's presented in real world spaces. I think it's a really interesting platform to have a look at, and maybe you can buy yourself an interesting space in the world. You can buy your house. Right. It's incredible. I was recently somebody showed me like Earth 2 and what you could do there, and like oh my God. I'm with you. I just tell people, I'm like, just do your research. That's all I'm saying. And then watching the gentleman that bought Beeple's NFT explain about what he's doing in the virtual world and virtual real estate. Something to think about, something to Google. That's all. I'm like you. I tell people, I'm like, I would look into it if I were you. But it's a fascinating time. What do you have coming up? Anything exciting that you want to share with the audience? Getting back to having a normal life.
Mm-hmm.
That's
a big deal.
That's really, it is a big deal.
A very big deal.
Not really. I mean, just tracking on, working on stuff. Obviously, for Days, we have some really exciting stuff coming up. We have our Days 100 collective, which is where we collect 100 of the most inspiring young people in Generation Z from across the world. And that's something that we partner with Converse on. And we also give away some money and we fund some ideas for young people to create some philanthropic projects based out of their passions, which is a really exciting thing that we work on every year. So if you're going to be heading over to daysdigital.com, you should definitely check that out. And aside from that, honestly, just living, getting back to having a real life, I think, and taking it slow as well. I think everyone's going to have a little bit of social anxiety about what it's like getting back into the real world and communicating with people in the flesh. So I'm just going to be nice to myself and take it slow and yeah, get back to living the fullest, most rewarding life possible.
Amen. Amen. Where can everybody connect with you online, whether social or if you want your email or with Days Digital, where can people get in touch with you or the brands?
Sure. So you can just drop me an email. Actually, it's charlotte.cijffers. Maybe check how to spell it if it's in the link below. At daysmedia.com, or you can also find me on Instagram. Just my name, Charlotte Cijffers, is the handle. There's only one of me in the world, so I'm very easy to find. But if you do find me, please say something nice.
Absolutely. Amazing. I really appreciate your time today. I can't believe it's been over an hour. Incredible. I mean, again, I feel like we probably could go at least another 4 hours on all of these different topics because everything is changing so fast, and it's super exciting, even though it's super transitional. And I also like your approach, even to saying, even in the real world, like, hey, just taking a little bit of time, taking a little grace for ourselves, and just kind of moving about the cabin accordingly and to what makes the most sense for ourselves. And but I truly appreciate having you on the show. This was an awesome episode. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.
Absolutely. And for everybody listening, Charlotte Cijffers. So as she mentioned, you can look up how you can spell it online. But just for the audience, I want to make sure I get this right. At Cijffers, Charlotte, right? Cijffers?
That's the one.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. Be sure to connect with her if you guys have any questions or you want to learn more about brands and Days Digital. And you can also find her online on Insta. Reach out. She's a busy gal, so just take that into consideration. And just to the audience, truly just really grateful for how fast we're growing, and we really appreciate everybody for tuning in and just being a part of this whole growth that we're experiencing. So thank you for tuning it on top of the covers, and it means just a lot for us overall, and especially as we're talking about the contribution of music and what's really happening in these changing times. Also, thank you guys for giving us feedback. We started getting a lot of ratings and reviews already. Please do so. Give us a 5-star written review on Apple. We still play in a little bit of a world of algorithms, and it does help more people know about us. We're really grateful. And of course, you can follow us on all major platforms at We Are Orlove, and myself at Matt Gottesman. And you can subscribe to Orlove YouTube channel. So we have weekly launches for our web series and then Under the Covers, but we also do exclusive footage from this episode. So if you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify or Google or iHeart or anywhere else, you can also watch this on our YouTube channel. So please be sure to check us out there. And we just appreciate each and every one of you guys. And thank you so much for tuning in, and we're out.